We are fortunate to have with us Chris Bomgaars, who's with the Every Pig team. Chris grew up in the pig industry. I've known Chris's dad, Dr. Dave Bomgaars, for many years. Chris grew up farming in Iowa, and he's currently the founder and CEO of Every Pig, which is based out of the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area and been active since 2017. So let's bring Chris up to the stage here. I know he's going to start with kind of an introduction and then move into his slides. Chris, the floor is yours to talk to us about the digitization of swine health, AI, and the future of the industry.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Johnson. Great to see you again. First, I want to start out by thanking Márcio, Jamil, Dr. Chagas at SwineTalks for putting together a really international audience today and a great lineup of speakers. It's really exciting to be here. So, yeah, as you said, I'd like to open up today just by having a little bit of a conversation, and then in lieu of a presentation today, I went with a screen share. So I'm actually going to show you a little bit of the platform and some of the advantages that existing technology can bring to the audience. But before we go into the present and the future, I want us to take a little trip back into the past and try picture yourself for a minute back in 1995. You're a 12-year-old in Northwest Iowa, riding shotgun in your dad's veterinary truck with a stick shift and a bag phone. And for those of you that are too young to remember bag phones, these were phones that were about the size of a laptop and heavier and cost about $3 a minute to use back in the day. And so they could only be used very sparingly. But imagine that truck barreling down a gravel road at 90 miles an hour to get from farm to farm to reach as many farms and customers as you could in a day. That little boy was me. Those memories, as you mentioned, Dr. Johnson, with my dad as a veterinarian, are still fresh in my mind. And the reason I'm telling the story is because I think it's going to be interesting for us to look at where we come from as an industry to where we're at today and where we're going in the future. So I'm going to show some ways in the presentation today that veterinarians can save time and money instead of maybe driving to 3 farms a day, cover dozens and dozens of farms a day through telemedicine, and also talk a little bit about the other technology and that pork producers and veterinarians are using to save pig lives and improve biosecurity, especially in light of the COVID situation that we're all still going through. So as you mentioned, Dr. Johnson, I'm a former pork producer and founder of Every Pig. Every Pig's an app that's focused on helping producers save pig lives through real-time recognition and response to health outbreaks. And in our short time together today, I want to share just some of the lessons that I've learned from 10 plus years acting as a pork producer, and then in my little over 5 years now working on creating innovative software for the industry. Towards the end, I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into the future and show a little bit about artificial intelligence and what Every Pig's doing with AI. So before we get started today, I kind of want to set the context. The conference today is all about change. You've heard from a lot of really smart people who have a lot of knowledge in different facets of swine production. But I think the common theme that all of us are really talking about is change management. If we look at all the solutions that you've seen today, a lot of them technologically have been there for 5, 10, 15 years even, and they're really just starting to get traction. One of the speakers earlier today who I know told me that they recently closed a deal that they started the sale process on 15 years ago. So I really want to encourage the users or I want to encourage the audience here to really think about what you and your company are doing to help foster change and innovation, and encourage you to be rewarding employees for taking risks, so they're not scared that one mistake could mean losing their jobs. So with that spirit of change and innovation, I'm going to jump into some of the lessons learned, and would like to start sharing a little bit of my screen here and showing you what Every Pig is doing to help move the industry forward. So the first lesson I'd like to talk about is that old ways are not always the best. I'm going to say something probably a little bit controversial right now. Paper barn sheets are dead. I think many in our industry take pride in doing things exactly the same way as they have maybe for the last 20, 30, or 40 years. And with all the technological advancements that we've seen in the last few decades, it's just not a sustainable philosophy. As Brian Parker was mentioning earlier, those that aren't adopting technology are going to see their competitors. And this is an international audience, and it's an international competition, really, in a lot of ways. And the fastest are jumping on the new technologies. And so competitors are embracing new practices, they're gaining more efficiencies, and they're eventually going to push those who aren't as efficient out of the market. The first practice that I want to talk about is the use of paper barn sheets. If you're working with paper barn sheets, as many producers are, you're working with very limited and old information. It makes your job a lot harder than it needs to be. So what we started to do as a former producer, at the time I left, we were raising pigs on over 350 farms. That was really exciting, but I know firsthand that paper barn sheets don't work because we were usually looking at data that was either a week or a month old. And that essentially means you're looking at mortality reports that someone's keying into a historical database, and you can't save dead pigs. So that's when I set out 6 years ago to start to digitize and replace the paper barn sheets. So what we're looking at here is a daily checkup. Now, these daily checkups are filled out by caregivers on the farm. A couple of the speakers earlier have mentioned we understand there are some farms with limited or no internet capacity, so we've built in offline modes to allow users to fill out this information while they're inside the barn and upload it as soon as they get to an area with reception. And I'll just kind of quickly walk through some of the things that we collect in the daily checkup, which really has all the information you might put on a paper barn sheet and more. The first thing we collect are pig movements. So that's pigs in, pigs out. We collect mortalities. And this is probably a good segue here in the mortality area. There are other companies today that have been presenting that also collect mortalities. What we do is we have an open integration philosophy, and so when our customers use MetaFarms, for example, and FAS, we've created integrations so the systems talk, and I'll get into a little bit more of that down the road. We collect medications, and here the users can select whatever medication that they used, the head treated, and the cc's per head. We collect symptomatic data. And this is really important because what everyone's been talking about today is really, in one way or another, moving the industry from being reactive. And by reactive, I mean looking at historical closeout reports of pigs that might have died 6 months ago to being, from being reactive to proactive. And a big part of that's really jumping on top of symptomatic animals. So we collect symptomatic data, and the user here just slides the percentage of the group that's showing that symptom, and they can add as many symptoms as they're seeing in the group. I'll just say coughing for today. We collect high-low temperatures as well from the barns. We can do this via API with a number of barn sensor companies or manually. We also collect water usage. And we do some interesting things with this as well in terms of warning users when water consumption has changed. Like right here, we can say there's a 320% change in water consumption. And then we've got custom survey questions as well. This one is, have you tested curtains this month? I'll go ahead and say no. And we can add photos and videos and notes. I'm not going to do that now for the sake of brevity. But that's as simple as a daily checkup is filled out by caregivers. We've currently got over 2,000 monthly active users from their teens to, I know we have users in their 70s. And Dr. Johnson mentioned it just a little bit ago, but I think oftentimes, we think of a lot of our caregivers and farmers as not being very tech savvy. And I think we're underestimating them in general. On average, the daily checkup in every pig takes about 45 seconds for our users. And so making it something that's really convenient for them is really important, and it's got to be user friendly so they don't have too many questions and they can just get in and out. So this is the digitization of paper barn sheets right here inside of our daily checkup. The second lesson that I've learned is communication is key. As I mentioned earlier, as a former pork producer with pigs on a lot of farms, we learned really fast that communications were just incredibly difficult. Veterinarians, field managers, caregivers, you know, they're getting text messages, phone calls, they're getting faxes, emails, smoke signals, all different kinds of communication, but it can be really hard for all of us, especially if you're in charge of managing a larger system, to remember the specifics around each group of pigs that you're responsible for. And I'd even go a little bit further and say it's impossible to remember that. And so what we've done here in every pig is we centralize all the communications for veterinarians and field managers to start recognizing and responding to health challenges that caregivers are reporting from the farm in one centralized place. So what we're looking at now is our farm feed, and this is kind of looks and acts a bit like a Facebook news feed, except for important pig health issues. And this is where veterinarians now are spending a lot of their time responding, and probably less time. We see a lot of our users spending less time driving from farm to farm, and instead of covering 3 or 4 farms a day, our users are starting to be able to practice telemedicine on the platform and virtually visit literally dozens of farms every day, really increasing their productivity. So I'm going to scroll down and just look at a couple of what we call farm feed events here and show you how this communication is happening. We can see at this site, the caregiver reported slight coughing, trembling, and some diarrhea. We can see the source, get a quick snapshot of the current mortality of the group, estimated average weight, and pigs under care. And we had an active caregiver here. A veterinarian responded, thanked Robert for the information. The caregiver responded. He got an automatic message and said he didn't want to jinx it, but the group looks really good. And so right here inside one app, instead of getting a bunch of text messages and voicemails from all over the place, our users can just take a look and dive into, for example, a veterinarian might want some context. They don't want to just know what's going on today. They might want to say, well, what's been going on that farm for the last few days? And this area, our barn sheet section, really serves as your modern day filing cabinet where all the old barn sheets were going in the past. And instead of having to get access to those, veterinarians and production managers can just take a look right here and immediately see everything that's been going on these farms as far back as they've been on board the system. And they can get a snapshot at a high level, or they can drill down into each one of these daily checkups. So veterinarians also might want to get an idea of the treatments that have been given to the pigs. Again, all this information is entered by the caregivers on an individual group level. And so this is a useful screen for vets to take a look at whether or not caregivers have maybe been dosing properly, how many head have been treated, are they too aggressive on spot treatments, not aggressive enough, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And they have all that information available right here within just a couple of clicks. So aside from some of these aspects on communicating directly with the caregiver, I think it's important to mention communication also means integration. A lot of the speakers today have spoken about how they recognize that their systems don't do everything, and they're exactly right. Our system doesn't do absolutely everything either. That's completely impossible. And our user base, our customer base, always wants to deal with, one free product that does absolutely everything for them. And I think we're all trying to deliver on those needs as much as possible. But there are going to be a number of systems that are used by each company. And that's why every pig's got an open integration philosophy. Our customers also many of them work with MetaFarms, many of them work with FAS, and users don't want to have to double enter data or triple enter data, mortality data, for example, into a bunch of systems. So we take care of that communication automatically. So I think systems communicating with each other is really going to be a key factor in the success of spreading technology in our industry. We've all got to play well together. So the third lesson that I'd like to talk about that I've learned is COVID's really ushered in telemedicine into the mainstream, and it's providing major efficiency gains and opportunities for veterinarians and production managers. I was reading some statistics recently about telemedicine on the human health side, and the numbers around acceptance since COVID have skyrocketed, as everyone would imagine. Now that biosecurity is not just a term used in the pork production industry or livestock industry, it's something that the mainstream people who may have no farm experience are really starting to think about. One of the other major benefits of telemedicine is just covering more farms every day. There's a major swine veterinary shortage going on around the world. I know that's definitely the case in the US. We've worked with customers in Brazil, also in Southeast Asia, and they all tell us about the same problems. There aren't enough skilled veterinarians that are able to cover enough farms, and all the vets we talk to are extremely busy. So I think whatever technological solution we bring to the market has to really be a tool to help veterinarians be much more efficient at their jobs. Another big advantage of telemedicine is better biosecurity. Visiting sick farms, although it's necessary at times, oftentimes these visits aren't necessary. We have some of our veterinary users will tell us 80 to 90% of the farm visits, they don't think the historical farm visits aren't necessary anymore because they can get the context that they need in the telemedicine functionalities that we have here in Every Pig. And visiting sick farms is definitely a biosecurity risk, no matter how hard everyone is practicing tight biosecurity. There's always a risk of spreading diseases, which is why vets have downtime, especially between visiting sow farms. So biosecurity can definitely be improved through telemedicine. I'm going to dive into now this farm feed event just a little bit and take a look at some of the pictures. Here we've got some feces. We've also got a video. And again, this is all uploaded into Every Pig by either caregivers, usually sometimes field managers, using their cell phones that are in their pockets, or some of our customers have started to buy tablets that go into the barns. But you can see here, videos tell a lot, and they're helping save a lot of trips to the farm. People can get an idea of the activity level of the pigs. I didn't have the volume on, but they can also hear coughing, for example, and really start to give context that the veterinarians need to help them make wise health and treatment decisions. So that's a little bit of the telemedicine component. Inside of the app, also, veterinarians can start to make diagnoses, clinical diagnoses or lab confirmed. In this case right here, you can see Dr. Schaefer made an E. coli clinical diagnosis just based on pictures alone. And he probably took a look at some of the context as well. Right here we can see diagnosed HBS via the picture, again, without having to drive to the farm at all. Those are some of the benefits of telemedicine, and one of the lessons learned here through COVID is that telemedicine is something it's here to stay. It's being used widely in hospitals, and it's going to be embraced more and more in our industry soon because of all the benefits I mentioned. The last thing I want to jump forward to is artificial intelligence. It's here in our industry. It sounds futuristic, and a lot of us think of artificial insemination when we hear AI still. But I think it's going to be helping out and impacting our industry in a really major way, and it's already starting. But first, I want to start out by talking about the definition. According to the Oxford Dictionary of Artificial Intelligence, it's the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, and translation between languages. EveryPig's already collected over 2.6 million daily checkups, and we've created 4 artificially intelligent algorithms through our data science team, looking at all of that structured data. And I'll just briefly talk about 2 of these before I end here today. One of those is a service that helps recognize patterns in the daily checkups that indicate a group is going to have a mortality event 7 days in the future unless action is taken. The performance metrics that we've got behind this algorithm are pretty high, and it's getting smarter. But essentially, the algorithm looks through all the historical checkups inside the system, and then it scans every group every night. This is machine learning, and it finds patterns in the data that indicate mortality events, and then it warns veterinarians so they can take action if needed, or they can say, no, this isn't useful, and they help give back feedback to the algorithms and help to train it. So that's one application that we have of AI. We've also got an algorithm. I'm going to scroll down the farm feed here a little bit further. That's a computer vision service. We've used over 20,000 tagged images from veterinarians to help train this algorithm to be able to detect over 20 different illnesses in pictures. And then we just give a confidence level. We say there's an illness potentially recognized. So we're letting veterinarians do the job of making the diagnosis, but we're just trying to offer a little bit of assistance to them. And in this case, Dr. Schaefer did jump in and confirm that diagnosis of HBS in the photo. And that's just one application of computer vision that we've had in production for a few years now. So I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but in summary, I think change has arrived to our industry, and I'd really like to encourage the people that are listening today to take a look at the practices and the kind of the culture that they're creating in their companies, and thinking about, okay, what are the solutions that we can be using, and how can we really encourage and foster a culture of innovation and risk-taking to help move the industry forward.
Thanks, Chris. And we do have time for a couple of questions before we move to a short break here. We've got a question up here on our chat from Dr. Tim Snyder. Tim's really one of the industry leaders in biosecurity, and you talked, Chris, about biosecurity and how this can help with those telemedicine visits. Now, the concern may come from producers who are entering this data in, the ones who are taking those pictures and videos of the necropsies and the clinical signs. Tim's question is, how are your users addressing that biosecurity concern? What are the rules of engagement that Dr. Schaefer's put in place to help manage that with users of your system?
Yeah, so good question, and thanks for asking that. We see different companies handling this in different ways. There are certain systems that have maybe tighter biosecurity protocols, although some might argue it's overboard, where they don't allow caregivers to take any devices into a barn. EveryPig focuses right now primarily on nursery, wean to finish, and finishing facilities more than on the sow unit level, and typically we see biosecurity is a little tighter on the sow units. But some of those companies that are users of EveryPig have bought devices, tablets, that they have dedicated to a barn, and they'll just have their caregivers enter the information into the tablets from the barns if they feel like they don't want caregivers bringing cell phones in and out of the barn.
Very good. We talked a lot about veterinarians being kind of a power user group of the technology, and there's a wonderful fit there. What about nutritionists? What about maintenance teams? What are some other power user groups that this is expanded to or should expand to?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So we see a lot of management companies out there have started to use our new site visit reports. For example, we have flag for follow-up functionality in there. So it's not just collecting data, it's helping remind caregivers, hey, you need to replace your generator, or the curtains in this barn aren't working. So we see management companies, but you mentioned nutrition companies. We've just in the last year or so started to get a lot of interest from nutrition companies that are starting, and some have started to actually offer our technology as a value-added service to their customers. So they might even pay for the licensing fees, offer it to their customers for free, and they may jump in with their veterinarians or production team and help give some guidance to their users and find really teachable moments and in their minds, that value add that they can give because they have more insight into the farm. So that's definitely another user base that's starting to take advantage of the new technology.
Excellent. One more question for you, Chris, before we let you go. You talked about artificial intelligence and starting to mine some of the data that's coming in with your algorithms. Is that driving your alert functions, your warnings, or is that all user specific? As in Clayton for his farm sets his own alerts. Does the AI do that, or do I do that, or both?
In short, both. It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid combination. So the AI creates some of its own alerts, like I showed in the mortality forecasting algorithm that runs once a night, and that is automated. We have antibiotic period withdrawal warnings. So when the pigs in a group cross a certain threshold, and you tell the system when pigs are over 200 pounds, if they've been given an antibiotic, I want a warning. So we at least can let that caregiver know, hey, your pigs are going to go to market soon. Make sure these don't get scheduled. And it's really important, as a lot of the people today that have been presenting have mentioned, every system's different, and the sensitivity levels and those thresholds they want to set are really, really different. Some of our users want to be alerted about one acute death, and some of them don't want to know until the acute deaths maybe pass over 5 in a group in a night. And so we use a combination of the automation and also allow users to individually modify their thresholds for their preferred sensitivity levels.
Awesome. I liked your story about riding around with your dad in the bag phone. I can empathize with that 100%. And I even remember the radio before the bag phone to radio back to the clinic and find out where you were supposed to go next. Biosecurity's come a long way since those days.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember that too. And the big antenna, the metallic, the magnetic antennas that you have to stick on top of the truck. And we really come a long ways. And some of the practices are the same and should be. And others, I think we've got new tools that are at our disposal that are going to help move us forward.
As crazy as it sounds, I am driving around with Dad's old vet bed, the 1977 model that he started with. I have no good use for it, Chris, but it is awesome and it looks cool, so I drive around with it.
It's got a lot of versatility. Plenty of meds you can fit in the back of those old vet trucks.
That's right. Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate you being a part of this, and thank you for the sponsorship of the event.
Thank you for the time.